Howdy, this is Jim Rutt, and this is The Jim Rutt Show. Listeners have asked us to provide pointers to some of the resources we talk about on the show. We now have links to books and articles referenced in recent podcasts that are available on our website. We also offer full transcripts. Go to jimruttshow.com. That's jimruttshow.com. Today's guest is Emil Ejner Friis. Emil is a thinker, a writer, and a teacher of metamodernism, and he's one of the two folks behind Hansi Freitag, quote unquote, as well as being a co-founder of Metamoderna. For the past decade, he's been wrestling with one big question. How do we build a listening society? In plain terms, a society that actually gives a damn about people's well-being, not just their economic output. Welcome, Emil.
Thank you, Jim. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a nice little chat. We've had Emil's writing partner, Daniel Gortz, on. I went and looked it up 4 times over the years. And
wow, 4 times already. Okay.
And in those ones, he was pretending to be Hansi Freitag, the cranky German philosopher who lives on the top of a mountain in Switzerland or something. And of course, sometimes he'd break character and be quite humorous. But anyway, for those who want to go look up previous instantiations of these similar ideas, EP 36, we talked about metamodernism in general, and EP 53, Nordic Ideology, one of the books, in EP 82, Building a Metamodern Future, and in EP 173, about a self-help book kind of modeled on Jordan Peterson's 12-step program or some fucking thing, which was, it had its sort of sincere irony about it, and we had a good time chatting about it in EP 173. Today we're going to talk, more generally without as much structure. But before we do, just for the audience's sake, because there's not everybody who listens to every episode. I don't know what else they waste their time on, but not everybody listens to every episode of the Jim Rutt Show. So if you could give us a 3-minute introduction to your and Daniel's branch of, I think the closest label is political metamodernism.
Yeah. Well, the short answer is that metamodernism is what comes after postmodernism. Right. Of course, that requires a longer explanation if you are not familiar with the century-old or half a century-old discussion on modernity and postmodernity. But basically, we are looking for political answers that goes beyond this postmodern vacuum, this woke vacuum that we are in. And we believe that the established progressives, they have failed to include common folks. They have failed to include multiple perspectives. And also, they have failed at actually addressing real stuff that matters. Yeah, it's often about, doing language policing and, sitting there talking about pronouns for eternity and not really addressing the real struggles of common folks. And what we're interested in are not only the material challenges of people, but the inner challenges. Because truth be told, yes, a lot of people are having a hard time in Western countries like US or Scandinavia. But where I come from, mostly 90% of our problems are of a psychosocial nature. Yeah, that people are anxiety, they're depressed, they feel alienated. It's not because they have too little money to buy stuff. Yeah, and I know people are struggling a lot, but in America and Scandinavia, people are not exactly walking around barefoot, right? So it's the inner dimensions, and that is what we would like to address, and that's what we feel that the established progressives have failed. And that's basically what our first book, The Listening Society, is about. And in Nordic Ideology, we talk about the 6 new forms of politics that we would like to introduce. Now, that's a longer discussion, and I think that Daniel, he has already been on the podcast introducing that. But again, we want to move beyond this, what we call woke postmodern vacuum that we are in. We don't want to go back to reactionary conservatism, but we want to include, the perspectives of common traditional folks. We want to address, their issues. So what we are looking for is like a new progressiveness.
Cool. I will have to insert my usual pushback, which I did with Daniel every time I had him on, which is I personally don't believe postmodernism was ever actually a civilization. I like to say I never met a postmodern farmer or plumber, right? And I consider postmodernism a side critique of modernism. And some of the critique was quite useful. For instance, be skeptical about reified grand narratives, right? Very good advice, as it turns out. Many people have been fooled many times by social grand narratives. On the other hand, later day postmodernism, the postmodern critique that especially came out of progressive universities since maybe the late 80s, is just like crazy horse shit, right? Reality isn't real. All perspectives are equal. Woo-woo, the witch doctor is just as good as Johns Hopkins if you have cancer, literally insane shit. And unfortunately, a lot of smart young people fell into this. But I don't believe it ever reached the status of being a civilization. I think we're still in modernism. We're in the late decadent stages of modernism, with postmodernism off to the side as both a helpful critique in some ways and an unhelpful corruption in any other way. But nonetheless, I do agree with you that we're about to take the next great step into something new, and metamodernism seems like a pretty reasonable next step, or as we would say in Game B talk, a good attractor. We think of Game A as, the status quo, whatever you want to call it. Late stage, hyper-financialized modernism is as good as any. And we predict that game is ending soon and it's going somewhere else. The problem is that many of the obvious alternatives are not good. We're seeing in triplets here, neo-fascism, the Chinese model, right? I mean, that's pure fascism. Without a checklist of any book on fascism, Chinese, every single item on the list. Neo-feudalism, which now people are calling techno-feudalism. If Peter Thiel and friends aren't up to that, I don't know what they're up to. And then, of course, we've had the threat for quite a while of neo-dark ages, theocracy. And we have that in the United States too now, with the emergence of the Christian nationalists. And of course, we have the Islamicist challenge in many places in the world. Not to say Islamic, but Islamicist, which is a distinction. So this is interesting times, liminal times, as many of us talk about. And you did mention that some of this thinking is also in progressive reaction against nutty postmodernism, wokery, etc. But what's the risk? Tell us what is the risk if we recoil from bad progressivism and go the other way?
I would first like to add that when we are talking about postmodernism or metamodernism, we're actually talking about like 6 different things. There's a difference between the postmodern society that we're in now. Then there's like postmodern philosophy. Because if we take Donald Trump, obviously he is not subscribing to woke postmodern values, but he is an expression of a postmodern society, post-truth, relativism, and also the way in which that he uses the media. It's all surface. Like he's not a good businessman.
I often say that Trump is our first postmodern president.
He is.
And people don't go, what?
Because he plays the media game very, very well. Now, when it comes to postmodern philosophy, like the post-structuralists, we have Foucault and Derrida, and these are like very advanced thinkers. Of course, it's like a bit of a parody to say, oh, it's just about relativism. No, these are like very important contributions to philosophy that metamodernism necessarily need to build on. We don't have this objective vantage point, like the eye of God that the modernist thinks, like the scientific objectivity. No, it's an illusion because it all depends on, the subjective observer and so on. So the postmodern philosophers have made very important contributions. Well, you can see we have like the postmodern philosophers, and then we have like a postmodern or late modern society, late capitalistic society that is all about surface, that is all about the images, that is like hyper real, to use that term. Then we have like postmodern social movements. We have, and there's a difference between like the civil rights movement. That's like a modern movement. Hey, like, dude, equal rights, we the people. And then the postmodern variant that looks at, hey, we have all these hidden discourses that even though we normally live in an equal society, in reality, it's not real because we have like structural racism and, the discourses are creating oppressions and so on and so forth. So we need to be careful about when we calling something postmodern or metamodern, what we are talking about. Now, you are absolutely right that postmodernism or the postmodern, we're talking about the value meme, meta meme, it feels more like just like a reaction against modernity, but it doesn't have anything to offer. It's like an antithesis. And that's absolutely right, because postmodernism cannot replace modern society. Yeah, all these righteous rebels out there, who are raging against capitalism and racism and so on, they have morality on their side, but they have nothing to replace it with. And it is actually similar to Christianity and all the other actual age religions, because in the same way that we have these righteous rebels today that are rebelling against capitalistic industrial society, but they have nothing to replace it with, we're still going to have like an industrial capitalistic economy. It's just going to be, like vegan hamburgers in recyclable bags sold to you by an esteemed minority person. But it's still going to be like Starbucks and McDonald's. Yeah, the wrapping it's going to be like a sugar coat around. The same thing do we see with the actual religions that were raging against the oppression and the injustices of agricultural civilization. And they're in the middle of the 1st century BC. We had all the Jewish prophets. We had the philosophers in Greece. We had Confucius and so on. And later, the Greek philosophy and the Hebrew religion would fuse into Christianity, gave us kind of like that. That was the righteous rebels of that age, but they never managed to replace agricultural civilization, like with a firm monopoly on violence and an agricultural religion. There was only when the first new, what I call hard meta meme emerged, namely modernity, and then they could make away with the old feudal order. Similarly, all these very kind and well-meaning postmodern activists and righteous rebels that we have today, they can rage against the environmental destruction and capitalistic society and so on and so forth, and they can make, we are like, progressing morally, but they cannot replace the foundational engine of society. And it is my claim that we will need to progress to the next stage, namely metamodernism, before we can finally what we call outcompete capitalism.
Yeah, very similar to the game D hypothesis that we have to literally outcompete late-stage financialized capitalism. We can't just sit there and wring our handkerchiefs or sit in mud huts and weave hammocks or something. It's just not realistic. What do you guys call it? Game denial, I think, right?
Exactly. And that is so embedded into the postmodern or the woke rebellion. Yeah, that, hey, they deny that there are social games. Not everyone can have everything. And if you don't address the basic fact that we live in a world with limited resources and people have interests and we cannot just all be friends and sit down and then share everything equally, unless you learn what are the actual social rules, you cannot change them. And then you are just like preaching, empty preaching. And it's not going to, like, we have had many of the things like anti-capitalistic critiques, woke critiques that we're here to, we've heard that for a century. And it's not capable at changing the foundational engine of our society. And it's because they think that, we just need to make a way with capitalism. But okay, what are the social mechanisms then? What are the change game rules to coordinate, our economic relationships? And there are no real, I would say, real substantial answers to that question.
Yeah, one of the things I like about metamodernism as a system is it emphasizes that there's two parts that have to go together. One is personal change, and then the other is institutional change, and the two have to kind of work like this.
Exactly.
If you have people that are down here, they can't jump to institutions up here. It's just not going to work. But if we can improve our institutions as we improve our people, we can then improve our institutions in a kind of a spiral dynamic going on.
Exactly, because you can have all the best institutions in the world. They're just not going to work if the majority of the population subscribe to like a Viking warrior ethos or something like that. I mean, take Afghanistan, for example. And it's also if people remain solidly gravitating towards like modern enlightenment values, and are super allergic towards everything postmodern, well, we will not be able to move beyond the current regime. It's also like, think about it, if your population consisted of zombies, you can have all the best institutions in the world, the best rules and frameworks and so on. But if your population just wants to eat each other's brains, like, what are you going to do?
Well, you're going to have a zombie society.
Yeah. So we need personal development. We need people to get over their trauma and all their psychological bullshit. People need to like know themselves better, but people also need to feel better, because it's very difficult to do progressive politics if people are just completely stressed out, and anxious and are full with the vengeance. And we can see that with our current leadership in the United States, that, okay, this is the result of a very traumatized population. And we have some very traumatized people in charge. It's clear that if we take Trump and Musk, these are little boys who had, not the best upbringing. Musk was like bullied as a kid. Trump has always, because he's a bit of a buffoon. He's always been outside. And then suddenly these buffoons, they find out that, our emotional state, that resonate with the large part of the population who also feel outside, who also feel they haven't been listened to, who feel angry. We also know when we feel angry, we get stupid, we regress back, and we just want to have revenge. And therefore we're seeing now, let's just like kick the Canadians and the Danes. Let's just get back at all these liberals and Europeans and everyone and public and federal employees and everyone. Yeah, just like give it to them, and becomes like very, very, well, regressive. And again, it's because people's emotional states haven't been like, as a society, we've let these people down. Yeah, like what the hell happened? Well, suddenly complete societies in Michigan and Ohio, they just like lose their jobs, their livelihood, and no one is there for them. They just see their societies dwindle away. Yeah, it's like heartbreaking to see what has happened in the United States in the last 30 years. And it's like no fucking surprise that people are gonna like kick back with a vengeance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the implications of late stage financialized capitalism. And I give the example that, I live pretty close to North Carolina, which used to be a major clothing and textile region. And they made lots and lots of T-shirts there, amongst other things. But when it became 5 cents cheaper to make them in Bangladesh than it was in North Carolina, these large factories were just immediately closed, and whole towns were, basically people thrown into despair for 5 cents, right? And there is no mechanism to omni-consider it. Is it worth paying 5 cents more for our T-shirts to keep these towns alive and vibrant? Because there's no mechanism in our society to do that. It's all about money on money return in a very short term, very gamified fashion, and that inner cycle is what is essentially allowing all this to happen. I don't think there's any cabal saying, let's fuck over the working man, but rather there's a cabal that says, let's let money on money return, late stage financialized capitalism do its thing, whatever it is. And that's the huge mistake. And to your point about people being pissed off, I live in a community deep in the Appalachian Mountains where my electoral precinct voted 83% for Trump in 2020. I haven't looked at numbers 2024, probably the same, maybe even higher. And these are good people. These are solid people. And our area, while not super affluent, isn't really super poor either. We've never had any mining or any factories at all. It's mostly farming and logging, and people commute for jobs over in the Shenandoah Valley, about an hour away. But they are angry, but above all else, they feel grossly disrespected by the coastal blues, as I call them.
Well, they are. They are, because they're just a bunch of hillbillies to them.
Yeah, and I'm one of these oddballs. I spend a lot of time with coastal blues, both in person and virtually, and I live deep in the most rural county east of the Mississippi River.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
We 2,200 people in the whole county. More than 1,000 square kilometers, and 2,200 people.
Working class Americans have not had anyone to vote for the last 40 years. It's just a simple fact.
Yeah, the Republicans put up somebody like Mitt Romney, an investment banker and a management consultant. What the hell?
You have the choice between like two right-wing parties. Like from a European perspective, you have the choice between two right-wing parties that don't give a damn about working class people. And, what we see, like Detroit would never have been allowed in Europe. You don't see something like Detroit. Yes, when stuff can be produced cheaper in other countries, we shut down the factories, but they're huge. Like, okay, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do with, how are we going to, people, like politicians will care, because we don't believe in this like cowboy capitalism that just like doesn't give a damn about people. And politicians, society will try to, okay, how can we transition into higher end goods? Because maybe we cannot, it's just cheaper to make t-shirts in Bangladesh, but maybe we could do something else. And also we see like with the auto industry, well, like if you take like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, these are like perfect places to transition into renewable energies, building windmills and solar and, much of the advanced high-end stuff that we need to produce. But again, you cannot just like only let the market choose. Yeah.
Because the market doesn't care.
It doesn't care.
It doesn't care about human well-being at all. All it cares about is replication of itself with a positive return. That's all it cares about. And we've allowed that.
Because like, Europeans would never allow something just like, now we're just going to shut down all the factories, Yes, protectionism is problematic to some degree. But again, if we look at especially the French model now, well, and they have been like, we've made fun of them, they have like protected their industries. So but now we just seen this world, okay, the French were right. They can produce everything. They have protected their industries. They've been slightly less efficient than the Germans and the Japanese. But they just have a full industrial economy, and they don't have a Detroit.
And the other interesting thing about the French, I just happened to see a report about this today, unlike the UK in particular, and to some degree the Germans and certainly the Japanese, the French are almost entirely unreliant upon American weaponry for their army, almost zero. And so all, Trump being this unreliable ally, doesn't bother the French at all. They got their own nuclear weapons, their own submarines, their own airplanes. It's smart, and they're a little bit poor.
Right. Yeah, de Gaulle was right. Like back in the 50s, when they were building up the NATO alliance, and the Germans and the British and everyone else just, okay, let's bandwagon with Uncle Sam. And de Gaulle was like, no, we're gonna do our own thing. And now, like, people in Denmark, my home country, they're like pulling their hair out because we've just like bought these like F-35 fighter planes. And like 10 years ago, there was a choice, should we buy like the F-35s or like the cheaper Swedish ones? And like with the if we had bought the Swedish fighter planes, we would get like more bang for the buck. But they chose to buy the Americans ones because these are our allies, our friends, and we would like to be in good standing with them. Now, they say like, well, if Trump wanted to, he could just turn them off.
Well, it turned out that's not probably true.
The United States could technically just stop the software updates, and then they would be rendered.
And then the spare parts also. Within a few weeks, you'd run out of parts, right? I don't know how many.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're like, shit, why did we... Like, and also with Starlink now, I don't know if you like that Elon Musk, he can just like turn off the internet for the Ukrainian army. And then like there was a Polish foreign minister who said that, hey, we're actually paying for that. And Elon Musk's reply, what? Shut up, little man. And then you're not paying enough. Have you any idea how destructive that is? Because are the Europeans just going to roll over? No, of course not. They're going to look for alternatives. So what we see now is that European like armaments, like weapon stocks are just like going through the roof. Because obviously the Europeans are going to buy European now. Because if madmen in Washington just like, sabotage things for them. And of course, this is going to harm the United States tremendously because, the United States has exported, a lot of armaments for the Europeans, and we've been happy about it. But, that, like what we're seeing right now is that it's the death of the Western alliance. It's gone.
Or at least it's going to fundamentally change. And interestingly, I put out a little mini essay recently where I actually said it is kind of ludicrous that the Europeans can't defend themselves at the present time. Their only plausible military adversary is Russia, population 143 million, GDP 2 billion, less than Spain's, right? And their equipment's been of course, they had this big military reputation. They can't even beat Ukraine, who was ranked 22nd in military strength. It would probably be an even fight, Russia against Poland, right? And why the hell can't the Europeans just step up and defend themselves? They can easily. And say, well, what about nuclear deterrence? Between the UK and France, they have 500 nuclear weapons, and they can make plenty more if they wanted to. So there's plenty of nuclear. No Russian's going to fuck with 500 nukes aimed at their face.
Yeah, exactly.
There's really absolutely no reason that the Europeans should be dependent on the U.S. for all these things.
And we also
but it will take a while to untangle it. So if I were both Europe and the U.S., what I would do is negotiate a separation, not a full separation, a partial separation along these lines. 10 years for Europe to gradually transition away from any reliance on U.S. logistics, signaling, GPS, anything else. But keep the alliance, right? So just like in World War I and World War II, when things went wrong in Europe, America was there to come and bail their asses out, right? So if somehow some new power arises, it's not Russia, but suppose Russia merges with China or something. Maybe then having this American backstop who would come to your rescue, but wouldn't necessarily have troops in your countries, it's probably the right way to be. We're still allied with each other, but we're not interwoven the way we are today. No need for it anymore.
No, well, in the current moment, like the Europeans don't trust the Americans,
and they shouldn't.
Like, you need to keep.
Yeah, they should.
You need to keep in mind that the United, like your president, is threatening my country with war.
Yep, take Greenland.
It's not a joke. Like the Europeans have, I think that the Europeans have already said goodbye to United. They don't trust that Trump will bail Europe. Like if Russia attacks the Baltics or Finland or Poland, something like that, we will need to do it on our own. That's also why they have thrown like $1 trillion into, like close to $1 trillion into defense spending. But the Europeans right now, we have said Europe is of course in shock what has just happened, and we need to plug the gaps. But the way we see it is that the United States has been taken over by fascist, Russian-friendly regime, and they have switched side.
It's probably not quite 100% true.
In the middle of a war. And people are, at one hand, people are like freaking out. On the other, I have never felt like, I feel like, resoluteness, that people are angry. And I have, people who have never had a patriotic bone in their body are suddenly becoming patriotic about Europe. When Elon Musk insults a Polish foreign minister, he enraged 40 million people in Poland, and he mildly, he pisses off the rest of Europe. And because we know that Trump and Musk, they don't respect us.
They don't respect anybody. I mean, famously, Canada always America's closest friend, they're now pissed off and reunified. And in fact, it looked like the liberal government was going to get voted out in a landslide. But all this Trump shit has made it a close race again between the Tories and the liberals. Yeah. And I have lots of Canadian friends. I've used to own property in Canada. I've been on boards of two companies in Canada, worked for a major Canadian company for many years. Canadians are really nice people, really friendly with the United States, but they're pissed off too, right? And for good reason. Trump is a non-reliable ally. But anyway, we know Orange Man bad, right? The great Cheeto, as I like to call him. But let's talk about something you touched on earlier, which I touched on, kind of pull these two together, which is, my nice people here in the mountains of Virginia, 83% for Trump. And part of it's on solid issues, but a lot of it's on disrespect and reaction against kind of crazy ideas from the left, not necessarily all that far left. Things like defund the police, open the borders, have biological males playing in girls' sports leagues. A long list of that America is the worst country in the history of the world, right? Okay, let's go down a long list of shit, fucked up stuff in world history. We're not even close to the top of the list. Called Okiophobia, the hatred of the homeland. These are the things that people react against quite a bit more, frankly, than the issues. The ludicrous insanity of the woke left. And the big problem is there is no center in the United States anymore, at least no viable. Actually, I do believe there is a majority who's in the center. In fact, I was involved with the No Labels movement that attempted to put a third presidential candidate out into the center, but it failed for a bunch of technical reasons and other reasons.
Okay, yeah, because I would be very interesting because like from a European point of view, I did from my point of view, but also I think like many Europeans, it's kind of like the Americans like so extreme that it's like this like battle between chicks with dicks versus Jesus with guns,
Yeah, exactly. And it's true.
Like, the whole trans thing, which I believe, like the whole trans thing, which is a minor issue, yeah. And of course, like people who don't feel they identify with their gender, okay, they should have the help they need and so on and so forth. But it's like a minor issue. But that was spun so beautiful or so well by the right. Yeah, that exactly. I actually suspect that was what won the election, because when you suddenly like common people just get, whoa, so we have these radical progressive who want to cut off our boys' wieners. Like, no, we're gonna vote for the other guy.
Exactly, and that's, as you said, people. There is a small percentage of people, about 1 in 1,000, maybe less, who actually do suffer from gender body dysphoria. They really do feel they're in the wrong gender body, but it's very rare, and those people deserve lots of consideration and lots of respect and everything we can do to support them. But unfortunately, there's become what I call internet or mimetic trans, where a 13-year-old girl decides, she would have been a tomboy for 2 or 3 years back 20 years ago, but now she's, heard this woke ideology and decided, I need to get my, blah, blah cut off, and I need to be on puberty blockers, and high probability that she'll either be a lesbian when she grows up, or she'll grow out of it. And that's what people object to, where particularly, and I described there's medical trans on one side, which is a real thing, kind of like type 1 diabetes, right? It's that level of severity. And then we have this internet trans, which I compared to anorexia. In the United States, particularly in upper middle class suburbs, lots of younger women stop eating, right, under social pressure about body image and all this. And some of them die. In fact, a very good friend of mine, a business partner, both of his daughters died. Well, one of them died, and the other was very sick for a long time from anorexia, which is clearly, you go to sub-Saharan Africa, you're not going to run into any anorexic teenage girls, right? It's a psychological illness of affluence. And this internet trans is the same thing. And and the fact that the woke left is so insane about it. Just think about somebody, J.K. Rowling, the person that wrote the Harry Potter books, very sensible, very kind person on the issue. The woke trans people, they want to literally string her up. And so people do strongly react against that stuff. Or in American higher education, until the Supreme Court recently ruled it out, there was rampant racial discrimination on admittance. With large numbers of bonus points given to various favored groups, and clearly in violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as well as the spirit of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And 75% of people of every racial group, including the majority of black people, oppose that, and yet the woke left has been in favor of that forever. So there's not just. There's lots of reasons why 83% of people where I live, unfortunately chose to vote for Trump because they feel like not only are their economic interests not been taken care of, but their cultural and value and spiritual ideas have been denigrated and actually, positioned as horrifying by the farther left.
Well, I would actually argue that a lot of the stuff that is bothering people is something you experience in the media and online, but not it doesn't affect your everyday life. It is no secret that the recent elections have been determined by social media. Yeah. Donald Trump is a social media phenomenon. And also many of the issues that are enraging people are because they are getting access to that via social media. Like, imagine a world without social media. The whole trans stuff wouldn't be visible to people. Yeah. And because I remember what it was like before, so like 20, 25 years ago. And yes, we had you learned that some people, they feel that they're born in the wrong body, and then, they need to have some needs to have surgery, and then we should be nice to them. And it's just it was like a non-issue in a way. Yeah. Like, people are curious. Oh, okay, that's interesting. But I remember TV programs, how the trans issue was addressed back in progressive Denmark in the 90s. And it was it didn't enrage people, just hey, I'm a man, I like to wear dresses. Okay. And the consensus was that, of course, if a man likes to wear dresses, he should be allowed to do that because we are a liberal, free country. But the way that social media has spun the issue and enraged people, and then suddenly people are seeing blue-haired trans drag queens attacking their, it's not real. Yeah, it's not real, and I think that something that we really need to address, something that's destroying our democracy, is these internet platform monopolies. And the algorithms they are designed to elicit as strong emotional responses as possible. And anger is one of the strongest emotions. And we are just feeding into that. And that's where we get this, gigantic battle between Jesus with guns and chicks with dicks, because come on, guys. Because that's the image you get, that Americans, they're they're gun nuts, and they are super racist, and they are driving around in big monster trucks, and then you have these progressives that are all about, and it's just it's not real.
Well, there's of course, like anything else, there's most stereotypes have some truth to it. There are, Americans. I'm a gun nut. I proudly confess to owning far more guns than I need, and I would say where I live, every single household has at least one gun, and many much more than that. Do not break into any houses around here, people. You will be dead, right? And such. And there are lots of big trucks around, so there is some truth to the stereotypes.
Yes, but social media exaggerates, and also.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to lay something out here. I'd love to get your reaction as a professional thinker about these things. This is the first time I put this idea out in public. So this actually came to me from my very good friend, Peter Wang, who we have regular chats about various things. And one of the things I've been using lately is the phrase, the intersubjective verification of the interobjective, meaning how we know from philosophy that we don't actually perceive reality directly. We have perceptions, we have probes, we have experiments, we have instruments, and we talk to each other about what we think we know about reality. And that intersubjective, the conversation, the challenges, etc., provide a unified, socially constructed model of reality, which is never quite perfect, but is always getting better as long as it's grounded in the interobjective, the things that we can both measure independently and come up with fairly similar results. Well, anyway, Peter made we were talking about, well, why isn't this working in social media and online more broadly? Not just social media, but in email lists and in sort of crackpot, private forums and things of that sort, which is that he intuited that online is the perfect medium for intersubjectivity to grow that's not grounded in interobjectivity, right? So we're just talking about what everybody else thinks. And I go, whoa, this is one of the biggest ideas I've heard in a long while. Think about crazed wokes, right? Think about crazed neo-Nazi Christian nationalists. Most of the things they say or vaccine deniers or flat earthers or, the moon landing was faked. All of these QAnon, it's all ungrounded in reality. And so it's in retrospect, of course, but I'd never heard it phrased that way. And it's really changed how I look at these systems. And it's, yes, it's the algorithms. Yes, it's advertising. Yes, it's this and yes, it's that. But I think it's even deeper than that there's something fundamentally about the online world that is like a petri dish for growing intersubjectivity without interobjectivity.
Well, what we are seeing is that it is a complete collapse of the reference system. Yeah,
I think that's the same thing. Yeah, same idea.
With postmodernism, we should be critical towards all authorities, and it has correctly criticized, this illusion of like a perfect observer and all that. But again, as society develops, become more and more critical. Our standards also, like our expectations, also increase, and we become more and more critical towards all authorities. Suddenly, the reference, we don't trust the sciences, we don't trust our politicians, we don't trust the media, and then suddenly, everything is just we enter this like post-truth that anyone can become an authority, and also on the internet. Any crackpot, like suddenly we have this amazing technology. There's no filtration or selection mechanism. Anyone can go online, and in many ways, I compare the internet like to the printing press. Like the printing press, amazing invention. We had like the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment would of course not have been possible without the printing press. Yeah, amazing invention that we often celebrate. But we shouldn't forget that the printing press caused 150 years of religious warfare.
Indeed.
And witch burnings. Yeah, and it's the same we see now when suddenly we had access. We have this revolution in our information technology. And the first thing is because we are not ready for it. We are not on a sufficiently, like our institutions are not ready for it, but we as human beings, as our minds are not ready for it either. And what happened is that we go absolutely bonkers. And because our brains cannot handle the information, our institutions cannot manage, this all this information. What we see now is basically a rerun of what happened in the 15 and 1600s.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that when we have had these like very simple technology, social media, that you can share text and pictures and sound with everyone. Well, imagine what's going to happen when you put AI into the mix. I'm not afraid of Terminators taking over. I'm afraid of these technologies are just going to turn us completely fucking mad.
They seem to be doing it at an accelerating rate because as, I follow the AI industry pretty closely. And about 2 weeks ago, I finally realized I can no longer keep up because we're here at this place in the elbow where the exponential just gets really, really steep. And at the same time, it certainly feels both in the US and you look at Europe as well and around the world that sense making is just shredding, right? We're seeing the AfD as the second biggest party in Germany. That's not a pretty thing. We're seeing Le Pen is, probably possibly contending for the presidency. In Italy, we have a formerly neo-fascist party. They're not neo-fascists anymore, but they're pretty far right.
Meloni.
Actually,
And I would actually say that, okay, yes, this is serious. This can be dangerous. But I come from a country, we've been through this 20 years ago. Yeah, we also had the rise of the far right, and they rose like to 20. At their top, they were like a quarter of the population. What happened in Denmark was they were integrated into the political system, and then okay, yes, you don't like immigrants, it's fine. Maybe you actually have a point. We're taking in too many immigrants, but let's sit down and we need to make decisions about hospitals and schools and roads and so on. And what we have seen is that by taking on with actual responsibilities, these populists have become kind of like toothless. And now they are around like 12% of the population. But if we look at a typical Western population, we just have to accept that around 20 to 25% of the population, they subscribe to these far-right populist ideas. But many of them may also have a point that, we don't like, there's like too much immigration and so on and so forth. And what we have seen in Denmark is, okay, fair, you have a point. Let's like restrict immigration, but still like make it somewhat humane. And we see the same development in all European countries. You need to think that in Europe, we have like a multi-party system, which is relatively stabilizing. Like if Trump had been in Europe, he would have had a party with 20-25% of the population, and then he would need to form an alliance with the traditional conservatives, and they would. It wouldn't be this extreme swing from one extreme to the other.
Exactly. We've talked about that on the show before, that American institutions have a whole bunch of forces that essentially force a two-party system, and that is not very stable. I say the exact same thing. I've estimated that Trump's support somewhere between 22 and 27%, no more than 27.
Yeah.
But it's enough to dominate the Republican primaries, and with our particular institutional structure, with first past the post voting for the legislature, with the electoral college, et cetera, with winner take all on a state basis, pretty much guarantees two parties. So 25% Trumpians is enough to dominate a party, and then they, like every American party, they're a coalition. There's far right, there's religious right, there's business right, there's country club right, and there's people who hate wokies, right? And you add them up, and it turns out it's 51% of the populace.
But it's very un-American, isn't it? Like in America, like you go into an American super, you have like 50 different boxes of cereals. Yeah, Americans, they love choice. Yeah, that's a European. You just say, wow, you have like, and then you have like a billion TV channels. Like it's very and then you have like two parties to choose from. I think the Americans would be happier if they could have like, different flavors, if they could have like different political systems, parties. And what I see happening now, like, is like the last spasms of this like old system, and the silver lining to Trump's landslide victory.
It wasn't a landslide. He won by 5 points. It wasn't really a landslide. He tries to tell people.
It was like he got like two and a half million more votes. Like I think Kamala Harris was 72, and he got anyway. But what we see happening, that's a silver lining to this. That all right? First, Trump, he destroyed the United States has for decades been more akin to an aristocracy than a democracy. And and Trump is partly a reaction against that. Again, like, yes, he's a billionaire from New York, but, being against the elites. Yeah. It's like first he made away with the old Republican aristocracy. And in the last election, I would claim that he has like destroyed the old Democratic aristocracy. And this is very similar to the Greek tyrants described by Plato. Like, we need to keep in mind that before Athenian democracy, they had a tyrant, kind of a dictator for 20 years. What this dictator did was that the population, the common folks, were fed up with the old aristocracy. So they ganged up on the aristocracy, on the old elites, by allying with a strong man. Yeah. And then they had a tyranny for 20 years, and then they got tired of him, disposed of his heirs, and then you had this amazing development that we still speak about today, that democracy emerged. But it was only because the tyrant had destroyed, completely annihilated the old elites. And I see that there's a similar chance for America here to create a real democracy. And yes, we are talking about election that obviously Americans should have more choices than just like two systems. And of course, like, we shouldn't have gerrymandering and voter suppression and all these kind of things. But I see this as a great chance for renewal of American democracy, because Trump is obviously running the country into the ground. All right, we are at a bifurcation point that it could go either way. Maybe like Daniel, he thinks that we're probably going to have like 8 years with Vance after Trump. And it's a bifurcation point. If we could have like a 40-year-old, like we have a dictatorship for 40 years. But we could also have something new emerging in 4 years, or maybe even 2, because of the incompetences of the current administration. And I think that could be very interesting for us in the liminal web metamodernist to participate in, because I think that we have some unique capacities. Like the old woke left, I think they have understood that, oh shit, we let down the working class, the working people. They are simply not resonating. They are pissed off. Okay, what can we do? I think they will be open to listen to people who understand multiple perspectives, who understand stages of development, to help give birth to a new progressive movement that is more inclusive than the old one. Like the old progressive movement that just lost has been like with the language policing and political correctness and the holier than thou thing. It's been like it's not very inclusive, is it? You just say one wrong word and then you're out of the club, right? And I think that the silver lining to this disaster, because it's just a fucking disaster. Yeah, like we just look at the stock market now, is that something better can emerge from the rubble, and this wouldn't have been possible if we had just had another Democratic president and then business as usual. So I'm coming to the United States in the fall, and I hope to mobilize people in this. In our circles, mobilize people, organize, and just have a talk about what can we do to make sure that this bifurcation points go in the right direction and we don't end up with 40 years of dictatorship.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best light to put on the situation. We could probably, no doubt, find some other ones as well. Now, how do people follow what you're up to? So in case they want to meet up with you when you're in the United States or sign up for your classes or what have you, do you have a website?
Yeah, I'm gonna send out a newsletter. We have currently started using Substack. If you just search Metamoderna, I'm going to Brendan's place, Brendan Dempsey Graham in Vermont. We're gonna have a 3-day retreat there, and after that, I am good. Am I even allowed to talk about this, Nick? Nick, where you are? Nick is not answering. But I have some activities out in California, and I'm going to the United States in the fall. So if you're interested in meeting me, just send me a message. I want to connect with as many people as possible, and I want to kick this community in the butt to take action. It's great that, okay, as Brendan said, that okay, first you hit the cushion and then you hit the street, right? But we cannot just sit around in a meditation retreat forever and ponder the meaning crisis. Guys, the meaning crisis has been canceled. Yeah, if you cannot find meaning when we have a fascist takeover in a world on the brink of World War II, I mean, you're not gonna find meaning anywhere. And then again, as you talk about, we have this techno-feudal overlords that are just like short-wiring the entire economy and gonna like turn us all into serfs. Okay, guys, there's a lot of meaning right there. There's a lot of glory as well. You know, this is gonna be, it's gonna be amazing. It's gonna be so great to take down Musk and Trump. And it's also, they're so incompetent, you know, with like, they don't know how to run the economy. You know, they are really, really bad at diplomacy, and taking them down. Like, imagine the glory and the like just it's gonna be exciting. Yeah. So I'm actually really happy, even though after the election felt like being punched in the gut. But I'm doing these like gratefulness meditations now, and just like, okay, you know what? Thank you. I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah, that I know what to do. I feel I have a direction, and just, okay, thank you, God, for giving me my world war. Like, the world war I've been looking forward to my entire life. And like, who doesn't like a good fight?
I love it. All right, we'll wrap it right there. Emil, Ejner, Friis, great conversation. Look forward to chatting with you in the future.
All right, have a good one, Jim.
Audio production and editing by Andrew Blevins Productions. Music by Tom Muller at modernspacemusic.com.